In 530 BC, the Persian king Cyrus could be regarded as the undisputed world hegemon. At that time, 3/5 of the major civilized areas of the known world had already fallen into the hands of this legendary figure. The remaining areas were either insignificant and not worth conquering or extremely remote and unknown. However, in Cyrus's strategic vision, one target remained unresolved: the nomadic Scythian tribe known as the Massagetae, who lived in the Central Asian steppes to the north, as described by Herodotus. It was in an effort to subdue these defiant nomads that the mighty king of the world embarked on the final campaign of his career. However, he was about to face the most tragic end of his life, being defeated by those he considered barbarians. His head was taken as a trophy by his adversaries. Long before the Persian army conquered Babylon, they had been campaigning across Central Asia for 6 years. However, after their initial rapid expansion, they quickly realized they hadn't solved any key issues. Even though they controlled important cities like Samarkand and established a series of colonial cities and fortresses along the Sir Darya River, they still couldn't stop the nomadic tribes further north from continuing their raids southward. Moreover, these tribes were not only different from the many Iranian inhabitants of Central Asia, but also ventured further than their nomadic relatives on the southern Russian steppes. The nomads the Persians had previously encountered more or less engaged in some farming to ensure their livelihood. However, for the tribes living north of the Sir Darya, agriculture was a foreign and insignificant secondary activity. Their entire way of life was based on pastoralism, gathering, and hunting. Due to the lack of iron ore and advanced smelting techniques, these nomadic tribes scattered north of the Sir Darya still used bronze weapons, often inlaid with gold ornaments. Noble warriors were typically equipped with full-body scale armor and Kuban-style helmets, and each was a master archer trained from a young age. Whenever the climate underwent slight changes, the fragile nomadic economy would often face unsustainable hardships, forcing the tribes to move southward en masse to raid the wealthy farmlands and urban areas. Although the Khwarezm region already had Persian garrisons for protection, they often struggled to cope with the highly mobile cavalry. Furthermore, like their Scythian relatives, the Massagetae also had fierce infantry armed with composite bows and battle axes, capable of besieging Persian fortresses. Thus, Cyrus resolved to launch a campaign against northern Central Asia to alleviate the frontier crisis for the empire he had personally established. In 530 BC, the imperial army crossed the Amu Darya, receiving support from cities and fortresses along the way. However, the level of agricultural development in the region, including Khwarezm, was not high, making it extremely difficult to sustain the troops. If, as classical Western historians claimed, Cyrus deployed up to 200,000 soldiers for this campaign, the supply lines would have to extend all the way to the southern regions of Media or Bactria. As for the Massagetae being targeted, they had long been subjugated by the stronger Derbaces tribe. It was only due to the recent death of the Derbaces leader that they finally had a rare opportunity to rise up. Subsequently, Cyrus proposed marriage to Tomyris, the wife of the tribal chief, hoping to wed this formidable nomadic heroine. Tomyris, who had effectively become the queen, understood that if she succumbed to the Persians' coercion, all her people and territory would become merely a minor part of the empire. Thus, she decisively rejected the marriage proposal, providing Cyrus with a pretext for war. Persian engineers swiftly constructed a pontoon bridge with towers across the Sir Darya, gradually sending their massive army to the northern battlefield. Tomyris then sent another message, hoping Cyrus would not act rashly. She suggested that if he insisted on war, he could choose to fight at any location on either side of the river. Cyrus, unwilling to let the nomadic army cross and ravage his territory, chose to decisively lead his troops across the river. Before setting out, Cyrus took precautions against any unforeseen events. he sent his eldest son, Cambyses, back to the old capital Pasargadae to be the heir apparent. Meanwhile, he dispatched his younger son, Bardia, to the important eastern province of Bactria. Should anything happen to Cyrus, Cambyses would immediately ascend to the throne as the king of Persia and the king of kings in Asia, while his brother would ensure the security of the eastern provinces, guarding against potential Massagetae counterattacks. After completing the river crossing, the Persian army marched north for 3 more days before setting up camp for their next move. To lure the elusive nomadic tribes into attacking, Cyrus ordered most of the supplies and livestock to be left in the camp. He then led the main forces away, leaving behind only the elderly, sick, and a few slaves to guard the camp. This tactic quickly caught the attention of the Massagetae prince, Spargapaces, who, without much thought, led his troops to raid the camp. Faced with the sudden assault of the nomadic elite soldiers, the remaining guards were swiftly annihilated, and a large quantity of supplies was seized by the nomads. Triumphant from their initial victory, the Massagetae decided to camp in the Persian camp, indulging in the wine-filled pottery and the herds brought along by the Persians. As a result, Cyrus's army quietly returned at night, slaughtering the sated barbarians. Spargapaces himself was captured, and unable to bear the shame of his capture, seized an opportunity to commit suicide. Ambitious Cyrus led his forces deeper into the northern wilderness. However, as the long-distance pursuit continued, the troops and supplies became increasingly strained. Issues like hunger and disease caused significant non-combat losses, severely depleting the army's strength. Meanwhile, Tomyris had already rallied the Massagetae army, ready for confrontation. The ensuing battle was described by Herodotus as the fiercest battle fought between non-Greeks. Both armies, proficient in the use of composite bows, formed their battle lines on the vast plains. The Persians, following their usual tactics, positioned their infantry in the center, with the most elite units at the core of the formation. Auxiliary troops from Media and other eastern provinces were arrayed to their left and right. The cavalry was stationed on the flanks and rear of the infantry line. In contrast, the battle formation of the Massagetae was entirely different. Their cavalry, composed of military elites, occupied the center of the formation, while the flanks were held by infantry phalanxes from the lower classes. The battle began with both sides exchanging volleys of composite bow fire, each emptying their quivers in one go. The Massagetae cavalry would also charge forward, shoot arrows at close range, and then retreat calmly, maneuvering back to their original positions via the flanks of their infantry phalanxes. The Persians, protected by thick scale armor and with their horses' chests and heads covered in heavy fabric, suffered minimal losses during this exchange. The Persian cavalry approached the Massagetae infantry from the flanks. However, their arrows and javelins were ineffective against the large shields used by the Massagetae, and they incurred heavy losses from the concentrated bow fire. Once all the arrows were exhausted, the Massagetae cavalry and infantry launched alternating fierce charges, forcing the Persians to close ranks and adopt a dense formation to withstand the onslaught of the northern warriors. Weakened by the harsh northern climate, the Persians ultimately could not withstand the ferocious assault of the nomadic fighters. Even the battle-hardened Cyrus himself was overwhelmed in the chaos of the battle's final moments. According to Herodotus, the founder of the world empire ultimately had his head severed by the barbarian soldiers. His head was placed in a bag filled with blood, fulfilling Tomyris's promise to give him his fill of blood. Although the Massagetae suffered heavy losses and lacked the strength to launch further attacks on the southern frontier, the Persian border remained permanently south of the Sirdaria. This boundary, established by this battle, remained largely unchanged until 2 centuries later when Alexander the Great arrived with his army.